The Galactic Academy of Unified Sciences was not, by any definition, a quiet place. 700 students from 43 recognized species attended its sprawling campus on the orbital ring above Centauri Prime. There were Thraxians with their 4 arms and crystalline exoskeletons. Valhari whose bioluminescent skin pulsed with their emotions like living mood rings. Karathi who communicated through subsonic vibrations that made your teeth hum if you stood too close. And then, scattered through the halls like rumors of something dangerous, there were the humans. 12 of them. Out of 700. Most of the alien student body treated the humans the way you treat a small dog that someone insists isn't aggressive, with skeptical caution and a vague suspicion that the reassurances were optimistic. Selena Voss did not help this perception. She was the third-year human enrolled in the advanced xenobiology track, and she had arrived at the academy the way humans apparently arrived everywhere, with too much energy, too much curiosity, and an unsettling comfort with things that should have terrified her. She'd once casually dissected a Thraxian poison scorpion during a lab session while the Thraxian student beside her watched with barely concealed horror. She'd explained, cheerfully, that the venom composition was actually kind of similar to a box jellyfish back home, as if this were a comforting comparison rather than a declaration that Earth was a nightmare. Professor Neil, a 4-eyed Valhari of considerable academic reputation, had since assigned Selena to a corner table. Not as punishment. As a buffer zone. The trouble started on an ordinary Thursday. Voron Kahl was the kind of student that institutions like the Academy produced in reliable quantities, brilliant, decorated, and quietly monstrous about it. He was Draveth, a species from the inner colonies, bipedal, covered in ridged gray plating, and built like something that had never once considered the possibility of losing a fight. Draveth physiology put them in the top 3 of the Academy's recognized combat species. They had natural armor plating. Reflexes twice the average humanoid baseline. Bone density that made them functionally immune to blunt trauma. Voron knew this. He had made a career of knowing this. He was also, Professor Neil had noted privately, exactly the sort of student who found the presence of humans at the Academy personally offensive. Not politically. Personally. The idea that a species without armor, without enhanced reflexes, without natural weapons, a species of prey, by most biological metrics, had been granted full membership in galactic civilization was, to Voron's worldview, a clerical error. He had been making this opinion known in small ways for 2 years. On that Thursday, in advanced xenobiology, he made it known in a larger way. The class had been studying stress responses in cross-species contexts. Professor Neil was explaining how different species escalated from threat detection to physical response, and why understanding this was critical for interspecies diplomacy. It was a good lecture. Selena had been taking notes with the particular focused intensity that her professors had learned meant she was paying genuine attention, which was rare enough to be worth noticing. Voron raised a hand. "Professor," he said, his translator rendering his words in the flat, polished tone Draveth used for formal speech. "Isn't this module somewhat academic when applied to certain enrolled species? The stress response of prey animals is primarily flight. There's limited diplomatic value in studying panic." The class went still. Everyone knew who he meant. There were 2 humans in the room. Selena, and a first-year named Marcus who was sitting very carefully very still, the way prey animals do when a predator is nearby. Which, Neil thought with some discomfort, rather proved Voron's point in the worst possible way. Selena stopped writing. She did not look up immediately. She set her stylus down. She folded her hands on the table with the deliberate, unhurried quality of someone who had all the time in the world and was choosing to use it thoughtfully. Then she looked at Voron. "You want to run that experiment," she said. Her voice was calm. Conversational. The tone of someone asking if you'd like more coffee. Voron turned toward her with the slow, theatrical patience of someone who has never lost an argument by waiting. "I'm not sure what experiment you're proposing." You want to observe human stress response, Selena said. In real time. Under threat conditions. She tilted her head slightly. Stand up. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Selena, Professor Neal began. With respect, Professor, I'm not going to touch him. She hadn't looked away from Voron. He's going to stand up, and he's going to do what he clearly wants to do, which is demonstrate that Draveth are apex and humans are prey. I'm inviting him to. A small smile. Not a friendly one. The kind of smile that is aware of something you aren't. Go ahead, Voron. Show the class. Voron stood. He was, by any measure, impressive. 2.5 meters of plated Draveth, evolved over millions of years to be exactly what he looked like, something built to fight and win. He moved the way armored things move, with the slow confidence of knowing nothing in the immediate environment could hurt him. He crossed to the center aisle between the rows of desks. Selena stood up. This, too, was a measure of something. She was 5 feet 4 inches. She was wearing a standard academy uniform. She had no armor, no plating, no visible weapon. She weighed approximately 60 kilograms, of which none was natural armor. She looked, by every biological metric Voron subscribed to, like exactly what he'd called her, prey. She walked to the center aisle and stood 6 feet from him. The Thraxian student near the back had quietly moved her chair to the wall. The Valhari beside Marcus was pulsing with rapid, anxious bioluminescence. Professor Neal was standing very still, running several calculations simultaneously about liability and whether his employment contract had a clause for this. Voron moved. He was fast. Draveth fast, which was significantly faster than human fast, or so the physiological tables indicated. He lunged forward with a Draveth grappling form, arms spread wide to catch her and demonstrate, conclusively, the gap between their species. What happened next took 0.4 seconds. Selena didn't step back. She stepped into him, inside his reach before his arms could close, and her left hand caught his right wrist in a grip that stopped his momentum with a snapping solidity that made 3 students flinch. Her right elbow came up and struck the joint of his extended arm at an angle that wasn't designed to break it but communicated, with absolute clarity, that it could. Her weight dropped and shifted in the same instant, her center of gravity becoming an anchor that his forward momentum broke against like a wave against a pier. Voron stopped. Not slowly. Not stumbling. He stopped completely, mid-lunge, like a recording someone had paused. Selena held his wrist. Her elbow rested against his joint. She looked up at him from very close. She had to look up. He was still 90 centimeters taller, with an expression that was not triumphant and not angry. It was, somehow, worse than either. It was patient. Earth, she said quietly, in a voice meant only for him, is a Class 4 Deathworld. We evolved as prey. You're correct about that. Her grip on his wrist shifted slightly, demonstrating without applying force. 30,000 years ago, something happened. We looked at everything that was faster than us, stronger than us, better armored, better clawed, better everything. She held his gaze. And we figured out how it worked. And then we survived it. All of it. Her eyes didn't blink. We are the only species in recorded galactic history that domesticated the apex predators of our own planet and then made them pets, Voron. We didn't run. We studied. We adapted. And then we won. She released his wrist and stepped back. Voron stood very still. Stress response of prey animals is flight, Selena said, turning back toward her seat. You're right. But we're not prey animals anymore. She sat down, picked up her stylus, and looked back at her notes. We're something the galaxy hasn't quite named yet. Professor Neal let the silence last for exactly 4 seconds. Then he cleared his throat. Yes. Well. That was an unexpectedly practical demonstration. He pulled up his lecture display with the slightly shaky enthusiasm of a man very grateful nothing had broken. Moving on to Karathy threat display modalities? Voron returned to his seat. He did not speak again for the remainder of class. Marcus, the first-year human, was looking at Selena with the expression of someone who had just watched something reclassify itself in their mind. Selena finished her notes. Later, in the hallway, Marcus fell into step beside her and said, "How long have you been studying Dravath joint mechanics?" Selena considered the question. "About 20 minutes before class. I looked him up when he transferred in." She shrugged. "Every predator has a structure. You just have to read it right." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Is that a human thing?" he finally asked. Selena smiled, a real one this time, warm and a little tired. "That's the human thing," she said. Somewhere in the galactic records, Earth is still classified as Class 4. The species that lives there is classified as something considerably harder to define.